meaningful.
But I'll come to India in a moment. Europe is threatening trade bazookas and counter tariff measures on America. Are we heading in that sense for a tariff war? We are already seeing elements of that, but could we be heading for a full-blown tariff war? And will Donald Trump chicken out, or is he going to stick to the line of confronting Europe in particular?
You know, you never know with Trump, but one of the things that has become clear is that he clearly chickened out many times in the trade deals, right? Every time the numbers, he'd propose numbers, the markets would go down, he'd chicken out. But then when he was told this, I mean, again, you're seeing this is one very emotional, thin-skinned man. He got outraged. And so for the next few months, he stopped chickening out because he realized people were noticing that and he didn't like that reputation. So with Trump, it's always fluid. He could back down, we don't know. But what we do know is, as I said, he doesn't seem to like his liberal democratic allies. He doesn't respect them. He doesn't honor his commitments to them. Who he likes are the autocrats.
Vladimir Putin, who I was going to... there seems to be...
And the Gulf states, he likes these guys he can cut deals with.
So where does that leave the war in Ukraine, which shows no signs of ending? Where does that leave an increasingly unstable Middle East, where you've got the Saudis and the Emiratis also in conflict with each other, Iran unstable, Donald Trump threatening Tehran by the day? Are we heading, therefore, in 2026 to a scenario of even more conflicts, a perpetual conflict, in a sense?
I think we are moving into a world that is much more volatile. About, I can't remember, 15 years ago now, I wrote a book called The Post-American World.
Yes.
And the driver of that world, I argued, was the fact that basically the emerging markets over the last 30 years had gone from roughly 5% of GDP to roughly 50% of GDP, and that this was a seismic historical shift in the world that hadn't happened in 500 years. What I didn't know that accelerating that trend was going to be the United States abdicating its role as the great stabilizer of the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. So I think, yes, we are going to see a much more volatile world because everywhere America's stabilizing role is going to be questioned, right? The Asians are going to say, are America's guarantees really solid? I mean, if you look at how he treats the Europeans, is he going to honor his commitments to Japan, to South Korea, to Australia? When I was in Australia last year, this was already the single biggest worry they had. When you look at the Middle East, you don't understand. Is he going to be for Syria forever, or is he going to change his mind on that? Is he, going to bomb Iran, or one day he talks about making a deal with Iran? And of course, in Europe, you see that his commitments are clearly not solid. And with Ukraine, you asked what is going to happen. I worry a great deal because Trump's basic strategy on Ukraine has been to side with Russia and to say, let's force Ukraine to accept all the concessions, and that way we'll get a peace. And then I'll get my Nobel Peace Prize. You might have noticed he's obsessed.
Yeah, he's obsessed with the Nobel Peace Prize. He's blaming the Norwegians now for not giving him the Nobel Peace Prize. But it's not even a multipolar world then. This Trumpian world order, let's not call it a post-Trumpian, but this Trumpian world order is not even multipolar because the main pole, America, is itself, as you said, abdicating its responsibility.
Exactly. This is why I called it a post-American world, because I thought about calling it a multipolar world, but you're right, it's not. The US is still the dominant power, and even though China is number 2, China has many reasons why it's not going to be an alternative.
It's not a G2 world.
It's not, because the Chinese don't have a rival reserve currency, for example, and they never will, because they won't open up at least not in the next 25 years, they won't open up their system to to free flows of currency. They're not that kind of open society, political system. They cause enormous suspicion from their neighbors. They're not a natural leader in that way. Russia is a one-dimensional power. All it has really is the army. Other than that, it's a collapsing economy. It's a gas station with an army. So Europe cannot unify. So we live in this strange world where the United States, which was the great stabilizer, is taking its marbles and sitting, pouting. Everybody else is trying to freelance, but no one has the capacity to fill the gaps. And that's why I worry that there will be greater instability, volatility, and perhaps even war.
So where does India then fit into this? We are one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing economy, large economy in the world at the moment. How should India deal with the Donald Trump? Just shut off the noise? Is that possible at all, given the fact that we now don't even know whether a trade deal will happen with the United States? How should India deal with this face of Donald Trump 2.0?
Look, at the broad macro level, what India should recognize is time is on its side. India has been doing extremely impressively economically, and this is basically, at this point, is fair to say, is a 25-year story. India has been progressing. If you look at the numbers under the Manmohan Singh government and the Narendra Modi government, they're actually roughly the same. Yes. Per capita GDP growth is about the same. And what's important now is there is a certain critical mass that has been reached. And 20 years of growth means in year 18, 19, 20, for example, the government has revenues of really substantial size. So you see that in the infrastructure build out. And Modi has been a very good manager of the economy in most ways. So I think all of that, just keep doing, focus on modernizing the economy, modernizing the society. India has a huge advantage. Most of its economy is domestic economy. Most of its economy is a consumption-based economy. Most people don't realize this is very rare. India and the US actually, I think, and Indonesia are the only countries where consumption as a share of GDP is over 60%. In China, I think it's 35%. So all those countries rely on exports to fuel their economy. India doesn't. India relies on internal consumption. Now, you do want exports because they are high value, they support high-paying jobs, they take you to the frontiers of technology. So continue trying to move in that direction as much as you can. The iPhone story in India is a remarkable story, from zero to now supplying 45% of America's smartphones. Continue along those lines. Continue along, EV lines. On the foreign policy side, have patience. Trump is volatile. Trump is idiosyncratic. And, to the extent you can, as I've often said, manage him. Try to humor him. Try to find, if the guy likes big fancy state dinners, throw him a big fancy state dinner at Rashtrapati Bhavan, which, by the way, is 4 times the size of Buckingham Palace. And, well, they had a few hundred horses out there. India could have a few thousand elephants. You could have the Maharajas and Maharanis, If the government is lacking any initiative or imagination, I would call the Ambanis and ask them how to throw a nice party that will impress the world. Play along with that, because he clearly, as I say, he is
a narcissist,
and he likes being the king. So treat him like that, and if you can get a good trade deal out of it, great. But mostly have the patience to know that you're not going to die one way. This is not a make or break for India. It's not going to kill India, but don't give up the courtship, because honestly, India needs the deal more than America does. The Indian economy has almost no impact on America. It's a pimple on the giant. But America does have an impact, because America is going to be the force that helps India move up the value chain in terms of technology, in terms of economy, in terms of the kind of industries. India should be aspiring to be at the frontier of technology, not just doing cheap labor stuff. And to do that, you need a partnership with America.